This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon everyone, Shalom Aleichem, Baruchim Haba. We continue in the Iggeres HaRamban. The Ramban is, as we mentioned many times, is based on the principle of humility, of accustoming oneself to act with anivos. And now the Ramban is going to tell us lemaisa, how to conduct oneself with anivos. Says Ramban, Al Kain, therefore, afareish lecha, I will explain to you eich tisnaheg b'midas ha'anava, how to conduct yourself in the midah of anava. So until now the Ramban is speaking about the attribute of humility and the degradation of gaiva. Now the Ramban is giving us direction how lamaisa one could accord themselves in the midah of humility. Because sometimes, even though it might be difficult for a person to think humbly and to have a humble attitude, but sometimes it's easier to act humbly, and through the externalities it will bring oneself to humility. And Rav Goldberg quotes the Rabbi Chanan in the Rekavitz Ma'amarim in Chelek Beis, that he brings from Rabbi Chanan, that he says he asked the Chafetz Chaim, what is the proper path for someone like me to try to gain humility? You know, if I'm going to go sit in the back of the Beis HaKnesses, I'm going to be thinking, there's no one in the shul as humble as I am. So sometimes maybe it's better to go sit in the front, because if you sit in the back, you're a hypocrite. You're going to be acting as if you're humble, thinking to yourself, there's no one as humble as me. And the Chafetz Chaim said, nevertheless, it's better to sit toward the back than toward the front, figuratively. Why? Better to sit in the back thinking, who's as humble as me, than sit in the front thinking to yourself, I'm not worthy of this kavod. Why? Because usually the maisa takes out of the machshava, and the machshava doesn't take out of the maisa. In other words, actions speak louder than words. So sometimes a person is better off acting humbly and hoping that influences him. So says the Ramban, Kol dvarecha yu benachas. The way to act humbly, all your words should be soft. V'roishcha kafuf. Your head bent over. If you remember in the Talmud Devarim on Perek Beis, Talmud Devarim says a person should be ashamed from looking upward in an arrogant manner. One should be focused downward. The Talmud Devarim says anivos is primarily dependent on the head, the position of the head. A person is only mizgaya b'haramas roishai. Then the Ramban says, ve'einecha yabitu lamata la'aretz. Your eyes should look below to the ground, v'libcha lamala, with your heart above. Now, it's interesting that if you look in the Gemara in Yevamos, Daf Kuf Hey Amud Beis, the Gemara says, "Hamispalel tzarich sheyu einav lamata v'liba lamala." When you daven, your eyes should be downward and your heart should be upward. Which, here the Ramban is saying, this is not just for davening, but this is all day. So even though during tefillah there's more of a focus on looking downward with your heart soaring upward, but really this is a position that one should aspire for always. And then the Ramban says, V'al tabit b'fnei adam b'dabercha imai. Don't gaze at the face of a person when you speak to them. Why not? Why should you not gaze at the face of a person when you speak with them? Says Ramban, says Rav Goldberg, this is also part of humility in Derech Eretz, that when you speak with somebody, don't gaze directly in their face. And this is connected to the next direction of the Ramban, namely that whoever you deal with, you should consider greater than yourself. Now, Rav Goldberg says, he quotes the Sifsei Chaim, Rav Chaim Friedlander, that obviously you have to act b'chachma. If you're going to look, nowadays, if you don't make eye contact with somebody, aside from the fact that they think there might be something wrong with you, but usually people are diagnosed of certain conditions if they're not able to make eye contact. So it's it has to be done within the realm, within the framework of social norms. In other words, at times, part of the social expectation is that you make eye contact with somebody, and other times, you don't have to look directly at them. But the point being is one should have the attitude, so to speak, of that they're almost ashamed to be looking straight at somebody's face, again, within the guidelines of social expectations. Says the Ramban, "V'chol adam yeh gadol mimcha beinecha." Everyone should be greater than you in your eyes. You should look at any Jew and say, they're greater than me. How's that? V'im chacham hayasher. If they're smart, they're wise, or they're wealthy, hu alecha lechabda, you need to honor them. Like the Gemara says in Eruvin, that Daf Pevav, Rabbi was mechabed ashirim. And the Rishonim explained the reason is, why would he be mechabed ashirim? Not just because they have money, because they have greater ability to be mekayim gemilas chasadim. The imrashu, if the person is poor, va'ata asher, and you're wealthier, oichachmen, and you're smarter than them, chashav belibcha, you should think in your heart, ki ata chayiv mimenu, that you're more liable than they are. V'uzaka mimcha, they're more innocent than you. If you're smarter than them, you should think that you don't fulfill everything that you know, so you're more accountable than they are. If you're wealthier, you have more resources, and you don't fulfill your responsibilities as much as they do. And you know better than them. She'im hu chayte, because if you sin, if he sins, hu shaygeg, he's doing it inadvertently because he doesn't know better. The atamezid, and you are intentional. In other words, whatever situation you find yourself, you could always look at somebody and say, they're greater than I am. You're smart. If they're smarter than you, they're smarter than me. They're wealthier than me. If you're wealthier than them, well, they fulfill their responsibilities more than I do. If they're smarter than you, they know more. If you're smarter than them, then when you don't fulfill, you're amazed. They might be a shogeg. Whatever situation you find yourself in, there's always a vantage point that you could say that in fact they are greater than you are. Says Ramban, "B'chol divarecha u'ma'asecha u'machshveisecha u'v'chol eis," in all of your words, all of your actions, and all of your thoughts, and at all times, even if you're not doing any of the above, you're not acting, you're not thinking, you should think as if you're standing before God, and His Shechina is upon you. His honor fills the world. Your words should be with fear, uveyira, and with awe, ke'eved lifnei Rabbi. So here the Ramban is saying that Shivisi Hashem lenegdi samid, one should always imagine that the Shechina is present, and one is in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's a certain reverence and awe that one should fear at all times. But here the Ramban is saying that whoever you deal with, whoever you encounter, you should consider them greater than you. Interesting, the Ramban says in Parashat Shemais on the pasuk Shlach na b'yad tishlach, that Moshe Rabbeinu thought, what does it mean Shlach na b'yad tishlach? The Ramban learns in contradistinction to Rashi. Rashi learns Shlach na b'yad tishlach, send Aaron. Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says send Pinchas. The Ramban says no, send anyone better than me. That the Ramban, Moshe thought that there's no one in the world who's not more worthy than he is. In other words, he felt he was the least worthy person in the world to carry out the shlichus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chavis Avavos writes in the Shar Kniyah, how did you become the master, the Adain of your whole generation? He says, I was never paigeya in anybody. I never met anybody that I didn't consider them to be on a higher pedestal than me. If they were smarter than me, I would say they fear God more than me, because they understand better. If they're smaller than me in Chachma, I would say their cheshbon is more lenient than mine, because if I violated, it's mezid. If they violated, it's shogeg. If they're older than me, I say they have more mitzvahs than me. If they're younger than me, I say they have less sin than me. And in that merit, I was able to become the master of the whole generation. It's not by doing so you don't put yourself down. In a way, you're mamlich. It's a way of elevating yourself, because by looking at everybody and thinking of yourself sort of a lesser than them, you in the end become the adain to everybody. So this is what the Ramban is saying, V'chol adam yia gadol mimcha be'einecha. Everybody should be greater than you in your eyes. Okay, Rabbi Isai, we'll hold it over here. B'ez Hashem, pick it up tomorrow. Wishing everyone a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.